All right, yep, so I have a notice here that the webinar has started as well as the recording, and I can see attendees are starting to join.
Okay. Are we now visible as a board to the audience?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
All of,
And how-
all of the board and staff who are panelists are able to be seen by the attendees.
Okay, so you're going to be the official clock. So let's go by your clock. Is it 5 o'clock?
I have 4:58 on mine.
When it's 5 o'clock, let me know.
Sounds good. I have 5 p.m. on my end.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jackie Anderson, and I am the President Pro Tem and Chair of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, and I would like to call our special meeting to order. The singular topic today is the Willow Point property, and we also have a public comment period that we want to allow adequate time for. But there will be, if you'll call up the agenda, we'll review that very quickly here. Okay, to the left of this slide, you'll see in the blue is our agenda. It's very simple. I'll make a few opening remarks, and then we will have a comment period where myself and Administrator Mike Kenny will also do some opening remarks. And then we will go on item 3, we will go into our discussion with the board on the information that we've collected so far and whatever else the board would like to discuss before we go to the public comment period. Our intention is to set the stage for what we've done to date and review that and accept that information as a board, and then we will open it to public comment. And again, depending upon the attendance, we expect that to be a good chunk of time, and we'd like to allow as much as possible. The next thing after the public comment, before I do that, we will be taking some bio breaks as needed. We've slated them for right before the public comment period and right after. And then the board will reconvene and then continue its consideration and its discussion and ultimately act on a course of action. And then closing remarks and official adjournment of the special meeting. So that's what's in store for us ahead. And with that, just a few opening remarks from me, and then I'll ask Administrator Kenny to do the overview and that he normally does with any project that comes before the board. I think it's important, first of all, that we be respectful of each other here tonight. There should be a lot of folks. We normally have 1 or 2 people in the audience, and right now it looks like we've got 43 already. And so that means that we have to be courteous of each other and make sure that we stay muted. I understand that our technology is going to be watchdogging that as well. But that helps everyone get a clear audio on their end. And so please note those technology courtesies up front. And I think I speak for the board when I say that we're happy that you're here. There's been a lot of noise on the internet the last few weeks, and I've seen not all of those posts, but some of them, enough of them. And clearly there's a concern, and we want to make sure that we're addressing your concerns and answering any questions that you have. But tonight you're going to actually witness a board meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District in action, with the exception of that split time in the middle for public comments. But this is how it goes. So we encourage you, even when issues like this aren't in front of you, to attend, to get involved, and we look forward to your participation. The other thing is just, again, mentioning those courtesies. When you want to speak, it's a little easier with the technology. You raise your hand or you go into the chat box. When you do raise your hand, the system keeps track of the order of each speaker, and so you will automatically be put into the queue in the order that you have raised your hand. And that doesn't get lost until you've spoken, and then you're removed from that speaker queue. The chat box is for those of you who do not want to speak with your voice, but to speak with your written word. And you can certainly do that through the chat box. Our wonderful staff is with us tonight, and they are going to be monitoring all of these various ways that you can address the board. And so we appreciate that, and you'll hear their voices from time to time. Jessica, Linda Meyer, Emily Hines, and Bobby Law will be helping us with technology tonight. The other thing is for the board. Again, we follow Robert's Rules of Order, but in sort of a loose manner, typically at our meetings, but we're going to be a little bit more formal tonight. And I am going to ask that the members of the board, when you want to speak, to address the chair first. And that way we don't end up speaking over each other and so on. And you get the microphone when it's your turn. So those are the few rules that I wanted to put out for everyone. And again, we welcome you here. And Mike, if you'll please get on and go over your introductory memo and the items that you wanted to address. Thank you.
Madam Chair, managers, just as noted, I just want to review the memo that I provided to you for the special meeting here on this topic, and kind of going first back, the earlier memo for the November 30th meeting was really more for some of the newer board members to kind of give a little background information about this particular effort on our part. It's been a long process, and again, it's been more than 7 years that the district has been trying to finalize a more permanent space for its operations and staff. So as we look through this, it's really a matter of that. We were on a path of developing a more defined process, and I'll go through a few slides here, but it was really the board's interest in trying to find something through this process, but more long-term, and trying to understand its bigger future needs and efforts. In particular, having completed our 10-year watershed management plan just this last September, that was a 2.5-year effort of taking public comment from different partner agencies, community members, etc. We then also completed a workload analysis that was an effort to define the amount of staff and the skills needed to carry out the mission of the district. So with that in hand, then we proceeded to find a firm that could help the board with some of this visioning, as well as provide some services related to potential architectural or other things, somebody that's been through this. So last February, we had invited, upon a review of several qualified firms, ISG, to come to the board and speak to the board. And so they had, at the time that we found, or I guess I wouldn't say found, but was suggested that the Willow Point property be something we look at. We were moving through this process, and in parallel then decided with the board to start looking at it to see if it was a fit according to really some of the metrics that we were looking for, but also gave us an opportunity to put into place some of the inputs and ideas that we had developed over the last year or so with the board through some of these other efforts. And I think to date now we will, board has received some items, and I'll go through. I think I have a checklist here, just an example that the board has seen, or at least the staff has used to try to work through the items that we want to make sure that we present to the board. But we have some of that information in hand now, just within the last couple of weeks. I think that will really help the board assess whether this property is really fit for the district's future intentions. One of the big outlying questions that has remained is the component of our mission statement regarding education of stakeholders. And what does that mean? Certainly a gap locally is the closure of the Warner Nature Center and the partnership that we had with them previously and with schools locally to have a location with the expertise to do that type of education with area students. District staff go into different schools and provide in-classroom education, and we have helped connect the schools with the Jeffers Foundation, which does a lot of curriculum development and provides support for environmental education. That's still being very different than doing hands-on work in a area that would have a wetland or a stream or some open water to do that type of education, which is really different than traditional environmental education, which is often more terrestrial in nature. So with that, I think probably the most pressing document that we have right now for board's consideration is the appraisal. That we wanted to look at this, and I think the one statement in there, if you could go back one slide, please. That top piece in italic is from the appraisal, and basically is the basis for the conclusion regarding their value that they put on the property. So and in general, it was higher than expected. So given the length of time that it's been closed, the fact that it's not been able to sustain a restaurant business, there was some initial thinking that maybe this property, once it went through an official appraisal, would be potentially more of a value. So that now needs to be weighed by the board now that we have that information at hand. So, and we can just go through the appraisal a little bit here. Next, please. So this is the firm that we had hired. Next, please. And then we did contact them. Next, please. And we'll put all this material that we're showing here. We will post that with the board packet online for people to review later if they want. Next, please. So just some of the overall summary pieces. This is the executive summary of the appraisal. Next, please. So, and I think again, that really some of the important pieces is just this, that the reader is cautioned and reminded that the conclusions presented in this appraisal report apply only as of the effective date indicated. And while they feel that presently the COVID is not adversely affecting the property, the prior sentence really communicates that things can change. So let's see, next please. So just wanted to give a little summary, I guess, for those wondering, what for watershed districts. I always often say they're kind of like school districts. They have a political boundary, but they're very defined. This is defined by the drainage of the water resources within the watershed district as a government entity. Next, please. And I think people would be, maybe a little surprised to find out that certain areas of Forest Lake do not drain to the lake itself, and particularly right along Highway 61. It gets very close. There's areas where it's basically goes right along the lake there. So, but the former city hall was north of Broadway, and it was located within the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. But the new city hall, city center is down below, marked with the green, and that is in the Rice Creek Watershed District. So we are allowed to have meetings there, but in terms of our physical location for our office and general services to the public, it was the board's desire to try to find a location within the boundaries of the watershed district. Really not unlike a city wanting to have its city hall within its own boundaries, or a township, for example. So next, please. Just in terms of a timeline here, wanted to share with people our minutes, or at least the dates that the board has discussed office space needs since the time that the city was preparing to depart from its old city hall. So it's been ongoing, a little bit on and off, based on staff capacity and availability. So obviously a lot of the early time meetings was we had to go someplace because the old city hall was closing, and we located well, it was Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 2014, and the city hall closed Monday, December 1st. Following that same Thanksgiving, we located into our current space, so which is a former hair salon. You can see in red, those are the times that the board had discussed it. August 12th is the date that we had visited the site. And then remaining dates are the time that the board has discussed it at a public meeting. Next, please. So
I'm ready to go back, to the board.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is kind of the conclusion for me, and then this really goes then into the board discussion. If you have any more questions, either on the memo or anything else that has been provided, please let me know.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be asking you to come into the conversation here, Mike, as well, as we move along. Well, board, before we get too far into this, I also wanted to introduce the board for everyone in the audience, and to note that we have 3 new members. We're a 5-member board. We have 2 members from Chisago County and 3 members from Washington County, Washington being the county with the most territory in our district. And with that, I'll turn it over to, I've been on the board for 20 years. I was part of the group that helped found the district and the needs that were occurring back then. The district started in 1999. And so there's been about a 10-year history before that of water issues before the district was formed. So a long time, and the next most senior member is Manager Schmalz, And Steve, I'll ask you to introduce yourself. And
Steve, you're muted.
I'm Steve Schmaltz, and I've been on the board for about 7.5 years. Came right before our administrator Kinney was hired, and we moved out of the old city hall. So it's been a lot of active work going on, and I think in the last 7 years we really started to accelerate into our implementation stage, which you'll, if you were following our meeting, you can see all the projects that we've completed. Thank you.
okay, Mr. Baki, I'll call on you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Dave Baki. I'm the newest member of the Watershed District Managers. And I just wanted to comment a little bit to our public. Since starting in September, it's been clear to me that this is a process that we've been engaged in and looking at office space for the staff. And a lot of the dialogue that's been going on has been very interesting. And I just want the public to know it's a process that we've been engaged in, and that at no point were any decisions made as far as the property. So just keep that in mind as we carry on our meeting tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Taves?
My name is Douglas Taves. I live out here on Moody Lake, where you can really see the progress that's been made by the watershed in our lake, which compelled me to get more involved. And I'm only on the board for 4 months, so it's a steep learning curve, but there's important things to be done here. Thank you.
And Manager Loth, I understand, is on phone only tonight. He has some other obligations, but he's not able to be on video with us. So Jessica, can you help me access Mr. Loth?
Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Chris Loth. I'm a manager. I joined just after Manager Taves, so I think it was around July. I live on Forest Lake, and I'm happy to be at this meeting.
Thank you, board, for that. And now I'd like to just start the discussion as we do any, it's maybe not this formal, like I said before, but I will start this discussion and get it moving. I'll move to Manager Schmaltz, and then I will open it up to our newest members to also participate in. And I want you to know that it's the board's decision on how you want to handle this topic tonight. Right now, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on this information that we've all had now to review. It's quite extensive. I will say of these 4 major items that we have received, the most important one to me is the appraisal report, because that determines, in my mind anyway, whether this is really a go forward or not go forward situation. And the history on my involvement here with this is, if you read the St. Paul paper today, you saw the interview that Mike and I had with the paper, and it was in there, but this really wasn't a property that I had considered, not even on my radar. And I know the restaurant as passionately as some of the people commenting on the internet do. It was wonderful. And it was great to go to. It was a great resource. But the reality is that there have been a number of restaurants there over the last 14 or 15 years, and they've struggled, I think, especially during the winter months. But this pandemic has really shaken that restaurant sector. And so when an individual, I don't know who it is, I'm not, even if I did, I wouldn't say, because I don't want that person to be attacked, but I really don't know. All I know is that someone came to Mike at the district office with this idea of looking at that property. That was shared with the board, and we all thought it was a good idea to at least investigate. And there were a number of reasons for it. We don't have to go into all of them, but they did include research and the opportunity to be able to do that type of close research to a water body, especially an urban lake, of the importance of Forest Lake. So the opportunities to learn more about AIS and sediment flow and other nutrient flows into the lake, it was a great opportunity to at least investigate. But beyond that, the district is going to need to have another facility at some point. And this property had, while it is more elaborate in some of the exterior features, the internal features are really open concept, and that's makes the building very flexible, not just for housing staff, but for also doing lab work, and then also doing the hosting of our meetings, and also public information meetings where we have larger groups. But we also have partners in the water world, the clean water world, I should say. And a most recent partner is the Lower St. Croix. And there's always a struggle to find a meeting spot centrally located where it can handle bigger groups for those types of meetings. So the possibility was there for looking at this in a different way and just considering those values that I just put out. But underlying all of that for me was whether or not we really would see a depressed appraisal coming through, or a depressed value, because of the number of years that the building has sat empty, and the most recently and most importantly, the impact of the pandemic. But with the appraisal, and especially the points that Mike has already talked about, in my mind, to me, it's a no-go situation, because that primary thing that we were looking for, that I was looking for, I shouldn't say we, I was looking for, was the right price. And if the price was suppressed enough, then that had some possibilities to move forward and make a go of this. But I was surprised to see that the appraiser's assessment was that the market for properties like this, now this doesn't apply to the whole restaurant sector, but in this particular situation where you have restaurants on a high value lake, apparently that market, that little sector of the market, is not as depressed as the rest of the market. So there were examples given of recent, within the last 12-month period, of some similar properties in South Metro, and then also closer here to Forest Lake, where those properties have actually been sold. So there were recent sales examples that fit the parameter of the appraiser, and so for me, it's just as exciting as some of those other possibilities were. It's just not going to happen. So that's how I feel about it. And Manager Schmaltz, I'm going to turn it over to you now to share your thoughts at this juncture.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. When we actually went through the building, we obviously knew that it was a high ticket item. So as Manager Anderson said, I think we were all pretty much convinced that there was an opportunity to pick up this property, as they say, with the fourth owner coming in, getting it at 30% the original cost or something like that. In other words, we knew we would have to get it at a reasonable cost if we were going to renovate it and make it work. And tonight we have that information, so we can move ahead. But there's a couple other things that were interesting about the property also. We were really excited to find out that the property is phosphorus neutral in terms of draining into the lake. There's a very porous and expensive parking area, so the water doesn't run off. And where the water does run off, there's rain gardens to catch it, and all kinds of natural habitat along the shoreline, etc. The other thing that's very interesting about this property, as you probably are aware, is the peninsula that goes out. And that has always been an attractive area for people when it was available to the public. It's no longer available to the public. But you've also probably noticed that over the last 10 years or so, about half of that peninsula is gone. And so if it's not restored or rebuilt, it's probably going to be gone in another 3 or 4 years, especially if high water comes back, which has been washing it away. So if we had been involved, we could have probably taken that project on and made that peninsula even more attractive than it is now in terms of almost being gone. So again, the key point here is the appraisal report. That combined with the remodel cost, it had to be at the right price to make it work for us. We knew it was a long shot, but we thought we couldn't pass up the opportunity to at least look at it. And of course, a lot of activity broke loose before we had all of our data in. So we had to sit here patiently and wait until we got the rest of the information back. And now we're in a position to make a decision. Thank you, Manager Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Manager Taves, I'll start with you.
Being new to this whole process, I kind of looked at it from how would I approach it if it was my business kind of going into it. And the watershed has the responsibility to remediate problems in the watershed, to protect the waters for future generations, and then to promote education about it. And for me, one of the must-haves is simply a functional space to carry out those tasks. I should have on that list would be preferred to be on the water that is within watershed management. So there's a learning habitat and environment to bring especially students in and adults to understand what is involved in protecting watershed. And then along with the would like to have a space for education and for meeting, as you mentioned, the other watershed organizations have a common place where they can come in, even have the Forest Lake City Council come out there, have the Chisago Board of Commissioners come out there for meetings. I think this cross education is a really critical piece in our right now to get really through to the information that needs to be shared. And so this property kind of popped up. I love the restaurant. I wish it was still there, but it's not. And there may be another one that comes and goes, but it sure was a fascinating property to take a good look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Loth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Myself, like Doug, are relatively new board members. I don't really have anything further to add other than the hope that regardless of what decision the board collectively makes, that we're able to continue our efforts with the outreach and education in addition to all the other work that we do.
Thank you. And Manager Baki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll just repeat what I said earlier, in that I was, when I started in September, it was clear to me that we were in a process of investigating this property. I sensed early on that there would be pushback from the community because of the nature of the property. And so I was aware of that going in, and my feeling at this point is that this is not a good choice for our office at this point, but we'll take care of that vote later. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Is there anything else that the board would like to discuss at this time before we move into the public comment area? Okay. All right, then we're ready to start public comment. Looks like we have 76 participants. And am I capturing, Jessica, am I capturing all of the ones on the phone only and not just video?
So we have 66 attendees and 11 panelists. So there are 66 members of the public.
Okay. All right. Well, given that we don't have anybody on the phones or anything like that, correct? That's a total of 66.
We do have 7 call-in listeners, and that is included in that. Well, we're now down to 65, so someone had dropped.
Okay. What I'd like to do then is move that 2 minutes up to 4 minutes. And that gives a little bit more time for each speaker that wants to speak. And I think I'll skip the first bio break because we're moving through this quicker than I anticipated. Again, I would just like to review. Can we pull up that slide, please? The first one that talks about how to comment. Thank you. Okay, so this is how you do it. Down at the bottom, there's two ways to do this. One is to raise your hand. There's a little hand icon. And so you can do that, and that will automatically put you into the queue in order of your request. Or you can use the chat box, and that will be monitored by Emily, our staff member, and she will watch the chat box, and then at a periodic, let's say after we've gone through 5 speakers, we'll see what's in the chat box, and we'll have Emily read those comments into the record. And so with that, okay, no raised hands.
Yep, I'm not
And-
seeing any raised hands yet either on my end. The one other comment we might want to make is we're up to 8 call-in listeners now. So for those individuals who have called in, if you're looking to verbally make your comment to the board, we would ask that you email or call the district to let us know so we can unmute you. There's an option to unmute, which is *6 on your keypad, and that will allow us to unmute you so that you can speak as well. But for those of you joining via the Zoom video connection, you can use that raise hand feature at the bottom, like Manager Anderson said. As soon as you click that, it will move you to the top of the queue to speak. And it looks like we are getting a couple chats that are coming in.
Okay.
So it looks like that feature is working well.
All right, so let's start with the chat since we have those. And Emily, can you just start reading those? It looked like that last one was a question.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one that we received, Madam Chair, from Kevin. An appraisal is one person's opinion of price at a given time. If you paid for 10 appraisals, you would see 10 different numbers. Background, real estate broker in Minnesota for nearly 24 years. And I can read the second one as well.
Okay.
From Tara, I was a little late to the meeting. Was the assessed value shared?
I can answer that, or Mike, maybe you want to jump in as well, but the appraisal number was not shared, and we don't intend to share that. That's protected data under the Data Practices Act, and there's a reason not to do it, primarily because of the transient nature of that price, and that was the point of reading those points that were highlighted from the appraisal. We've shared that document with the public, though, during the post of the meeting and the meeting materials. So that's there. I think that anyone that's familiar with this situation understands what that comment means. You know, we're protecting what we need to protect, but it's not opaque. Is there anything else? Anything else in the chat?
Tara said thank you, but I'm not seeing any other comments.
Okay. I'll give, oh, here we go.
One thing we might want to do while we're waiting here is, oh, there we go. Someone has raised their hand now. I was just going to ask our staff member to test that feature for us, but it looks like it's working.
Okay, I'll read this, this one latest comment from Keith. What other sites have been evaluated besides the Willow Point location?
Okay, Mike, I'll let you handle that one.
At the original 2014 timeframe, we're moving out of the city hall. We'd probably have to go back to some of the minutes, but there was, I think, some 7 or 8 different office spaces that the district looked at. Factors were, of course, price, availability of a meeting space, location, etc. Ultimately, we picked on this current location because it had 2 major factors. It was more visible for the public. Well, actually 3. The price was reasonable given the market conditions at the time, and it also had a meeting space for the board and for other meetings. Not a large conference room, but it was sufficient at the time. It would certainly not be possible now if you were trying to do any measure of social distancing. So more recent, I think in the 2000, that prior to the first lease concluding, that we went and looked at see a property in 97. I don't remember the name of it. And then another one was the old Sears building. And that one we looked at pretty seriously. But it was a pretty high cost for renovation. There was no feature there. Parking was very limited, even for staff, let alone for visitors. And so ultimately, the board concluded at the time to continue in its current space and then start proceeding on a more defined process of finding a property either to renovate or build new. So that's kind of where we are today. And again, kind of back to the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that the board had started this process about a year ago, and we invited in a firm in February to present its qualifications after a review of several that were available or that we evaluated. And so they've been assisting the board and staff with the Willow Point, but also then helping just frame up what some of these space needs would look like in totality. So.
Yeah, and that process just formally was getting going when the property at Willow Point became available. And so that process is continuing to be developed. Mike, when do you expect to have that ready for the board? I think January or February, didn't you tell me?
Yes. So I just actually was just talking to Nick about it here in the last few days, and we probably expect it to be in front of the board as a final. We had sent a draft out at the November 18th meeting, so that that's in there. But while that is the land management piece, but also then the form that would probably go with it, the checklist we expect to have in there as well.
Okay, and then one other thing that I think we should probably talk about also is that when we were looking for the space that we have now, and that was a number of years ago, there wasn't much available for what we needed. And so it was very hard to find that space, especially for the public meetings and the workshops and things like that are held. And while our info meetings for the public are not as big as, the city, Forest Lakes and so forth, there are times that we had, probably 20 to 30 people coming through in our open houses and that kind of thing. And it was pretty tight. So there wasn't a lot of available space available at that time. Since that time, there are a few more buildings available. Those haven't been looked at yet, so to see if they actually would function. Some are quite old and would probably need a lot of interior work and so on, so a lot of renovation costs. And that's just context to help you understand when that concept of Willow Point as a home for the district and these other elements came up. It was worth investigating in the board's eyes. And so that's what we did. And we were under this investigation period. There hadn't been any commitment to buy the property. As a matter of fact, we tried to use the one vehicle that we knew of, called a letter of intent. And I wish it had been called a letter of investigation. We tried to actually get it named that, but the seller wasn't interested in doing that because it required all of that due diligence up front. We wanted to protect the public process where you gather the information and then you have public meetings and so forth, and that wasn't of any interest. So we actually did this without having any formal document signed. but the verbal intent of investigation was clearly known by the seller. But as has been mentioned earlier, the pricing, which was expected to be depressed because of the pandemic and because of the difficulty in keeping a long-term restaurant there, that didn't play out. And so that whole dynamic changed. And so now what we're getting into is the process of looking for a building. And we really will have that information more congealed, if you will, in about 60 days, probably in last meeting in January is my guess, or first meeting in February. And so that would be a time for us to take that meeting and have that full discussion on that process. The other thing also was the lumber prices had been escalating dramatically. They're starting to come down somewhat. But if we had to do any renovation or any new build, it would be really, really expensive. And so having an available building to look at, to explore, we thought was worth the effort. So we have some more comments here coming in, I see. So there's 3 hands now raised. So let's go to the raised hands and let's go with the first person. I don't see who that is by name. So Jessica, you'll have to help me.
Okay, the first individual we have up here under their Zoom name is Blake. You'll see a notice pop up on your screen that you've been asked to unmute.
Hey, thank you guys for everything that you do for the Forest Lake and the watershed. Just want to say you're doing a great job there. My issue with the watershed buying Aqua is everybody that lives on the lake will never see a restaurant there again if that happens. At some point in time, I feel the owners of Aqua will either lower the lease price or the purchase price to make it obtainable for a restaurant to work again. Another thing is I know you guys bought that property over on Third Lake by the landing. Can you not use that for educational purposes like you could right at Aqua? Another point is I know of a 2.5 acre parcel that's completely flat that you could build on and be $1 million under what the taxpayers would have to pay for your building. That's what I just wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Next person in the hand queue.
Madam President,
Yes.
do you want me to answer any of those questions first?
Well, I think you're keeping track of them. So can we save them and wait for the break before we go to the chat box? Okay. There might be some similar questions, Mike, so we don't have to answer them each time.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next individual we have up here is Wayne. So Wayne, you'll get a prompt on your screen to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Wayne Moe, and I was on the board from 2007 to 2019. And I just wanted to say, I can assure people that the board is prudent with taxpayer dollars. And this has been an ongoing investigation to look for a property when I was on the board even. And I just wanted to, I'm sure they'll make the right decision on this property that they were evaluating. And I wanted to ask, there was a property that I believe that the watershed got over near Cub Foods and Valvoline. Would there be any high ground on that land that would be buildable at all? I'll just put that question out there. And also I wanted to state that people that have concerns with the watershed district, they do have a citizens advisory committee that they're always looking for volunteers. And as far as the board, a lot of times the board of managers is short people. So if you want to get involved, there's plenty of ways you can get involved with the watershed. I think they do a great job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Wayne. Nice to hear your voice again. The next person, please.
All right, 1 minute here. So the next individual we have up to speak, their Zoom name here is Kel. Kel, you will receive a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yep, we
Yes.
can hear you.
All right. Hi, my name is Kel Malberg. I just want to say thank you for your time. I did submit a petition earlier this afternoon, and I guess I just wanted to address some specific facts in regards to that. And this is in regards to the Willow Point property on 8241 North Shore Trail. In regards to what I petitioned, obviously soliciting feedback, residential feedback, it was clear that there was a little bit of an uproar. And just to get on top of that was the main purpose of trying to generate that petition. The couple of questions that I have, well, first, let me just address my specific points. So that property is 2.1 million, obviously, as you guys indicated at this point, indicating a much lower value for that property. It would still be an excessive amount, and seems to be unreasonable for every residential person to pay for it. The annual taxes alone, trying to offset that with slips just doesn't seem like a viable solution. You know, and I did some basic math and just want to cover it. So at your current office lease payment of about $3,100 a month, you know, this doesn't take into effect the calculation of interest, cost of maintenance, insurance, stand services such as utilities. But just doing the basic math, right? Simple math, it would take 55 plus years to pay that amount back at your current lease payment. It just doesn't seem like a reasonable approach to any business. Okay. And then the questions that I have are, there are obviously tons of property, and thank you guys for doing your due diligence on that. I would like to ask that the properties that you have looked at in the past are published within the meetings minutes, so everyone can get context of what locations and where they are locally. And then typically when you do your due diligence, something else that should be noted in your minutes is how much space do you really need? That typically is in a due diligence agreement. What's your renovation budget? What's your budget for an acquisition? There's just so many different answers that haven't been presented within today's meeting. I know there's a perfect location within the Green Door consignment shop that seems to be a viable solution and viable option. It's close to the lake. Like Blake and others have said, you guys indicate you have property that you could, you know, do your R&D and education on. So anyway, that's my point. I have published the petition. You guys did receive it this afternoon. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I will make a note that, and we'll do this in formal board action when we reconvene, but I did send a email response to you, Kel, that we had received it, and it will be accepted tonight formally by the board. Okay, is there one more left in that hand queue? Let's get to that person, and then we'll go to Mike to answer some questions, and then we'll get to the chat.
All right, yes, we have one more individual here with their hand raised. Their Zoom name is Kenneth. So Kenneth, you'll get a prompt to unmute yourself.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for everything that you do and the rest of the board at taking care of Forest Lake and all the other surrounding bodies of water.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. My wife and I were homeowners on Forest Lake. We moved here about 6 years ago. And one of the main primary reasons that we picked Forest Lake was the Aqua restaurant, that it provided a destination that you could go to with your boat and bring friends, bring family, and go do something. And it was a real asset. And I think it's helps build the community spirit and life of the lake. So I'm hopeful that another, business operation restaurant will move in there. And so my request is the board vote to not pursue the Willow Point property. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to express my thought.
Thank you, Kenneth. Okay, let's go to Administrator Kenny, and let's have you answer some of the questions that came up.
Madam Chairs, managers, members of the public, thank you for those questions. I'll see if I can get through here. I was trying to tape them off to the side as we were coming along. So the Third Lake, Cranberry Lake Channel property, that's that executive home site, roughly 19 acres. It's mostly forested wetland. And about the same time, late summer, we were actually again approached by some residents on the lake about protecting that asset. We had then proceeded to put together a grant application with the support of the Forest Lake Association and the City of Forest Lake to the Minnesota DNR for that acquisition. And the board then proceeded with directing staff to do so. And we've been working with the seller as such. Presently, we have been awarded that $400,000 for that acquisition, the purchase price at $499,000. So that's 80% of the purchase price. That property, though, through that program is restricted. We would not be able to build on it. We can do some minor trails, maybe a few parking areas just off the roadway. It's questionable even if we could put a shelter out there. So the board, if it was to consider that as a property site for any construction, would have to then abandon the grant, which we've not concluded yet. But the idea was to preserve that parcel. So I would think that objective is there for the board. So I guess if I was to advise the board, I would say continue with the path, and that is to utilize the grant funding and protect that for the residents of Forest Lake, because there's such a large amount of linear foot of shoreline there, and much of it has a lot of native emergent vegetation, or just a large square foot, and again the forested wetland component of it. So there's that. Let's see here. So there's also, I mentioned something about another parcel flat. And again, the construction side, roughly 275 is kind of just for construction. But then all the other things that would go with it. We started the process internally, just thinking about, what kind of space we would want for that. And I know I'm kind of slipping down to another question here, but through this process and this fall, working with this ISG in a traditional setting, given some really limited wet lab space, but just traditional office setting, a couple small meeting rooms, really kind of, again, the open floor plan. We would not need to build individual office spaces, except for perhaps myself, just to have meetings with staff and others, which I presently do not have. I have an open space and I have to go off site to have meetings with staff for council, or now doing it via Zoom. So the other piece of that, so the one caveat with the Willow Point property is that roughly 1,400 feet would be the meeting space. So that's, you know, with an undefined education program from the board, it's unknown whether or not that's really a suitable square footage. But overall, in a traditional setting for the district staff, I think it's roughly 5,600 feet. 8% of the building would be walls, or excuse me, about 6%, 8% would be mechanical, HVAC, things like that. So it's wouldn't be a small, and it's why we're not able to fit everything in our current building. We're currently renting a couple storage units for equipment and materials that can be in freezing conditions, and then we have other stuff that's out in the city public work yard that's exposed to the elements. So, but we're trying to make do, and you know, we are taxpayers and try to be respectful. And I understand that we're competing with the same tax dollars that fund the school, libraries, roadway, and things like that. So I think if you have been following the district, you know that, and the work that we try to do, we always have return on investment, and using Lean Six Sigma principles, and particularly the Pareto principle, to identify high value return on investment for projects. And that has served us very well. And so we're trying to use the same principles when we're looking at office space. So from that standpoint, some donated property, right, or over by the Home Depot there, right, the Hool family donated some property, but it was almost entirely wetland. So, and the only place that's marginally upland would be across a fairly notable amount of wetland that would require fill and then would cost more. Obviously, it'd be a bad example for the board, but also would cost more to develop than through the process of the Wetland Conservation Act than it would be just to go find a piece of property. So, so it's not very suitable for that. And so people do donate property to watershed districts. We have another one currently under consideration. A third had been offered, but based on our evaluation of the property, it wasn't suitable for the district, and we declined it. So, so it is possible that actually the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District down in Bloomington, a resident there donated their property with a structure that they are using for their office. So, so it's possible to find properties like that. Let's see, next question. On the slips, yeah, the slip current, apparently they're on 16 of the 18, they're getting $28,000 of revenue off that. The property taxes are roughly $30,000. So, and the board mentioned that very early on, the very first meeting that the board discussed that topic of offsetting, that was important to them, and one that they recognized would be of concern to the residents. So,
Yes, Mr. Holtman?
And Mr. Kinney, sorry for the interruption. I just thought I would ask, are the chat questions being memorialized, or Mr. Kinney, would it be appropriate for you to read the questions before you answer them so we can be sure that each commenter has been recognized?
Yep, Madam Chair, Mr. Holtman, I'm just trying to respond to the people that have called in. So not the comments in the chat are being memorialized, and we would get to those through that process. To the question about the renovation budget, it really, I think that, well, considering if we would take the full value of the property, it would have been I think somewhere in the roughly maybe 8 to 10% over just building new. So, and again, the main value there was in the land and not necessarily in the building. So, but obviously, if the land value or the appraised value was notably less, then it makes it very competitively, just strictly dollars to dollars. An earlier comment on the appraisal being one person opinions, and that's always correct. We've encountered that on many occasions, but we also had, obviously there's just simply the asking price, but and the length that has been listed, the seller doesn't seem to be too motivated for reducing the price. But also on the many easements that the district has acquired or that I've been involved with obtaining over the years, appraisals typically are not that far out of bounds. And if they are, then there's a process for pursuing two. Often you might go to a second one or have the seller get their own appraiser and see if it's close in proximity. So, but it didn't seem this firm that the board hired really has a great reputation and felt they were more than qualified to give a good opinion of the property. So we take it as being an appropriate value that they've offered. So the renovation budget, all that on the budget side, I think that's where some things that the board really is still trying to work through what that would look like. We did contact one of our official banks to see about how readily we could obtain a note for $1 million, and they said it'd be no problem. But the other is that the district has been very successful in grant writing. We, in our Clean Water Fund, grants for doing projects. We're, of all the entities, city, counties, watershed districts, soil and water conservation districts, we have been the #1 recipient in the state of Minnesota in terms of receiving grant funds through that program. And we have helped facilitate another at roughly $4.5 million since 2014. And in addition, we've helped the city of Forest Lake facilitate another $800,000 of grant dollars. Obviously, we just got this $400,000 grant to a different program for the Cranberry Lake piece. So we're very good at that. And that was really part of the, trying to figure out what from the board standpoint, what did we need, and then start. There was a potential for asking for donations or certainly seeking grants and what partnerships we might have. We have a strong relationship with a number of universities and other entities, agencies. So I think that was the next part of the process that the board was going to engage in. So I think that's most of the questions that were raised by phone, and then we can get to the chat.
Yes, the chat, I don't see the numbers up there anymore. So Emily, I'm going to turn that over to you. And just so that we're fair with the comments that come in through the chat channel or vehicle, let's pause after 4 or 5 and see if there's any questions that need to be answered, and then we'll take the next 4 or 5.
Okay, I'll read. So we've gotten comments from 10 more individuals. I'll read the first 4 that have come in.
Okay.
So from Terry, what other properties did you consider? Why purchase versus rent a space? Rental would give you more options when circumstances change again. And then also said, never mind, basically answered now.
Okay.
Blake said, will the price to retrofit the space be shared? Mike said, is the Forest Lake City Hall still an option, even though it is out of the district? Were they open to it? And then John said, with the lack of an with the lack of in-person meetings the last 20+ months, how have you run your education in meetings? Can that continue? And with that, is a larger meeting space as necessary?
Okay,
Is there
so,
another- Is
yeah,
there
I think
another? Oh, that's three. Is there one more?
I had count, well, I guess I'll do one more since one person said that it had been answered. Vicky said, are there budgeted dollars for the acquisition of space for the CLFLWD? If so, what is the budgeted amount? How much of this purchase would FL residents and taxpayers be paying for? And then added, how much of this purchase would FL residents and taxpayers be paying for? Yes, I got that part.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Mike.
Madam Chair, managers, presidents. So I'll go back to that first question though. The purchase versus rent. We did a pro forma on the one property that we evaluated. And of course, the thing that would be realized is that the benefit to the ownership is that we would not be subject to property taxes and I think through, let's see what the other side I had on that, but also the profit to the owner. So from a strict dollar standpoint, it's why most government entities do in fact own their own buildings. The flexibility is certainly a consideration for things. But given now that we've completed the 10-year plan and some of the other analysis that the board has done in the last couple of years, we feel that presently this is something we could be at for some period of time to serve the public. So will the price of the retrofit be shared? And so I already did that from a previous comment. It's slightly more than what it would be to build new. Forest Lake City Hall is still an option, even though it's out of the district. So we are able to have our meetings there, and we did previously have our regular board meetings there, and then typically we would have one meeting alternate to the one in our office space. So it's probably an option going forward, but presently their policy has been that that they're not allowing outside entities to have meetings there. So and we all hope that at some point we'll go back to in-person meetings, and that would certainly be an opportunity because of the technology that they have. So so with the lack of in-person meetings in the last 21 months, how we run our education meetings, well, a lot of that first year of the pandemic, really not much was happening. In fact, we were really trying to figure out what were essential services that we needed to do, and based off of our review, of some of the guidance from the state, we did continue with all of our field work. That year, we completed in 2020, we completed all of our monitoring and other construction inspections and things like that. We did not do some of the in-person piece. There was some work that was being done that we did then by video and made that available. And so people were able to do that. And that certainly is a technology that has advanced significantly in this last 20+ months. That being said, staff has gone into the classroom again this year. And I think it's a request that would continue with the schools going forward, because I know from being mostly from being married to an educator that tactile in-person being able to have hands-on activity is really a far superior way to provide education. Yes, you could provide certain materials in the classroom, but it's I guess it would be difficult to replicate. Well, I guess you can collect specimens and bring them into the classroom as well. So, I mean, all those options are certainly there. And I think the question that the board is still wrestling with is is what does this space need for that particular purpose? We have had ongoing or communications with Forest Lake area school districts and this Jeffers Foundation, principally to talk about what would some of this shared services to the community look like, especially now in the absence of the Warner Nature Center in late 2019. So are there budgeted dollars amount? No, more or less. I mean, yes, for the purposes of doing the search, but the question, the board didn't really feel that it was necessary to put dollar amount into it because we didn't know if we were really how we were going to fund it. If it was going to be through some partial loans, donations, grants. I mean, it's very plausible that somebody could. I saw the other day that somebody wrote $1 million check to the library in Prescott. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that somebody would see the value of some of this activity and say, yeah, I would like to make a donation either anonymously or fund in a watershed education and research facility. And ideally, if it was tied to the district office, that would be most suitable or beneficial, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And of course, there's other water bodies within the district as well. So. Okay, was that the last question, Emily? Then I think of the series that you read out loud.
From Vicky was the last one, yes.
All right, I just want to make a comment on a couple of things. One is the retrofit, excuse me. We have the details on the purchase versus rent analysis on a very specific property from 6 years ago or so. But that's the type of analysis that would continue to be done on anything that we really were interested in. On the retrofit on this particular property, though, was 100% more than, or building new was 100% more than retrofitting the existing property. It had a lot to do with the open space concept. There's not as much retrofitting that's needed to be done, for example, on this particular property, independent of making a decision about changing the restaurant to an office and also being on prime shoreline. Just put that aside for a minute, those two important factors. But just looking at that structure of that building, the layout and so forth, and with lumber prices being as high as they are right now, those are starting to come down, on a monthly basis almost. And so that was quite dramatic at the time that we did that analysis between retrofitting existing building and building anew. But that analysis has to be done with every scenario. You just can't take the action or the results of one and apply it to the next situation. And then on the budgeting for the purchase of the building, that was never something that the board actually considered doing. It would be setting aside money over a number of years, but rather looking at this as a one-off kind of a thing that occurs, so that you are looking at it more as like a mortgage, taking out a mortgage or taking out a bond, that kind of a situation. So there would be payments over time like a mortgage. So I hope that answers that question a little bit more. Mike did say that, of course, in the investigation process, you have to have some budgeted dollars for that, which the district has done, but not for a big lump sum item like that. And then also investigating any inputs through other sources from grants or donations. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, Mike, for that detail. And now back to you, Emily, and let's listen to the next 4 or 5 chats. Okay.
Okay, the next 5 that came in from Jim, I think it is wise that you consider all available properties, but I also think it is wise you realize permanently taking a premium lakeshore property off the tax base is unwise. Jim Schottmuller, Forest Lake resident, then he added, I would encourage the board to reconsider using the new Forest Lake City Hall and disregard their desire to be located inside the watershed district. Trent said, are district staff currently working from home? If so, do the staff want to return to the office, and are they able to effectively fulfill their duties in a work from home capacity? An anonymous attendee said, is there an estimated ideal cost for space you're perusing? Will the vote tonight impact the grant you're applying for? What type of community programs are you hoping to offer? Are taxpayers really paying for this, or is it grant? Sure hope you don't build on Cranberry Lake Channel, as the purpose of purchasing was to leave untouched for land conservation. No parking lot, please. Yeah, for grant funds, bring more money into our community, not spending uselessly, bringing funding in and making our community better. The fourth one, Mark, how many meetings, both public and educational, do you expect to have per year? And then the fifth one that has come in is from a Galaxy phone. I don't have a name. Please do not build on wetlands. That would be against any watershed values. Why not repurpose some of the downtown that needs revitalizing? The old green door consignment.
Okay,
Okay, Madam Chair, managers, members of the public. So the first one, I think that's certainly in terms of taking the property off the premium lakeshore property. I think the board is certainly taking that into consideration. And as far as looking at the city hall, so I think we would continue to look at using that for the purpose of meetings. But they did not, there's no additional capacity for staff. So that would be, something that that's not really feasible, I guess, from that standpoint. From trend of the current staff working from home, is so do staff want to return to the office, and are they able to effectively fulfill their duties in a work from home capacity? So, and I think this is another question I mentioned earlier, what the traditional office space needs would be. But one thing that we're seeing a lot of is hybrid work, and something called hot seating. So I was in the Navy for roughly 29 years, and it was not uncommon for certain conditions that you did exactly that. You would hot seat, and of course in the submarines everybody would hot rack. You have to share your sleeping quarters. So it's not a foreign concept, and the board evaluating that possibility. Having small spaces that could be utilized and for certain staff. Some staff, though, have been throughout the pandemic still doing field work, and so they are in and out of the office daily, and their job is such that entails them to be mostly out of the office, but to headquarter out of the district office to retrieve equipment or return with samples or things like that. So and that or do inspections, and so that's probably on a regular basis, that's half of the staff, and then some others are more mixed. And for myself, I'm often still looking at project sites, meeting with landowners and things like that. But certainly in these conditions, a lot of the work administratively can be done remotely. That being said, we've had a practice of having somebody in the office to meet people that are dropping off materials for a permit or something else. So just to have somebody available. So and I think we do all look forward to returning to work and being with each other. So Is there an estimated ideal cost for space you're pursuing? Well, I guess if somebody made a large donation and it costs nothing to the taxpayer, that would be ideal. But you know, we haven't, that conversation hasn't even started with the community because we haven't really set, you know, at least the board going through this process has not been able to really collect enough information from partners and others, like what this community need is in terms of doing additional natural resource education. But we do know that Forest Lake, you know, Highway 8 and 35 split right here. And so the district is the gateway to the lakes, so to speak. And that concept has been referred to in the past by the board in terms of, you know, this being a logical place from a state that has 10,000 lakes to house such a thing. It's in, again, close proximity to many of the metro universities, and we have a lot of ongoing relationships with faculty members and agencies for different activities. In fact, we were recently, just late last week, we were asked by one of the state agencies to come in and do a presentation to their water quality staff about how we're able to achieve the results in the time frame and the cost, the reduced cost frame that we're able to achieve since 2014. Presently, we're 89% of our way towards our phosphorus reduction. It doesn't mean that we're all done with our work because there are other nutrients. And of course, a number of invasive species that are both in the district and on the horizon. So the next part of that question, would the vote impact the grant applying for today? They're really separate items. The Cranberry Lake property is a separate item from the Willow Point property. So the type of community programs that you're hoping for, again, I think to be determined, but we certainly have missed having access to the Warner Nature Center. And there certainly is an interest in this. And again, there are some other non-traditional schools as well as families that are doing a lot of homeschooling, especially in this COVID environment, that are interested in this and that we've been approached about for doing that kind of educational work for those types of communities and members in our community. So a taxpayer is really paying for this, or is it a grant? Again, unknown, but there are other grants that could be applied for, including even USDA funds for buildings for certain activities. So there's quite a variety out there. Again, on the Cranberry Lake Channel property, I think the board's intent is to just leave it as is with the minor improvements that are currently there. But you know, again, that'll be probably a discussion for the board in early January. So, and yes, we agree that it's if we can bring more grant funds in, the better, and whether from the state or foundations or others. From Mark, how many meetings, both public and education, do you expect to have per year? Recent board meetings have been pretty notable. We've had, I think, as high as 48 or 49 through a lot of special meetings through when we're developing our 10-year watershed management plan. And with that, then, so we partner with the East Metro Watershed Education Program, MREP. You know, they often help facilitate the development of educational program, and are, you know, looking for space as well. So I think that really is a matter of then of what, you know, what size space we would look to develop. I don't know if there's really any sense of, I mean, I don't get a sense that we're trying to replicate the Warner Nature Center, but But I think that having some access or something that we can do some hands-on things would be suitable. From the person on the Galaxy phone, please don't build on the wetlands. That would be against any watershed. Yes, of course. So that, yeah, that I was certainly not suggesting at all that we would build on that property that was the donation was made to preserve the wetland, and from that standpoint. So, and as far as revitalizing the downtown, yeah, there's been some discussion about that too. And since the time that the board has looked at that, obviously the green space immediately adjacent to the district office has come available. It's not necessarily for sale, but it's to build to suit. And the county has expressed some interest in a trailhead. The city has communicated the really high amount of use on the Hardwood Creek Trail and the need for something like that, an access point for people to get off the trail and then to be able to come into downtown and frequent businesses, etc. We had looked at the building there with where the green door is, and at least at the space, the last time we looked at it, I think I just missed that from my earlier list. That was a site that we had looked at. It was not suitable because it required trying to merge two office locations at the time that were not at the same level, as well as then we still had the storage issue and potential parking issue for that particular site. But we're participating in the downtown analysis, and we've been working with the city to look at the stormwater management pieces of that as well. So, all right, I think that answers those questions.
Okay, there are two hands up in the other venue, so I think we'll call on those two, and then we'll come back. How many chats are left, Emily?
I have 6 more individuals who have chatted.
Okay, good. So we'll come back to the chat. So let's move to the hands for now.
All right, the first individual we have here indicating to speak is the Zoom name Joe. So Joe, you will receive a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, how does this benefit as far as anybody that lives on the lake? Obviously, there's 900 and some houses on the lake. Everybody wants a restaurant. Nobody wants a business on Willow Point. I mean, that's prime real estate. I don't know any state buildings or employees that are enjoying prime real estate like that, whether you're doing watershed or whatever you're doing. I appreciate everything you guys do, but I just don't see any value in this at all, especially for somebody that pays high taxes already on the lake. I live just down the road from where you're trying to buy, and this doesn't benefit one person living on the lake. I just don't understand where you guys are coming with on buying this building. Maybe you guys can justify that more to me, but I just don't get how you get that prime real estate. That shouldn't even be a discussion. We're wasting so much time talking about this, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Next. For you, Jessica.
Yep, the next individual we have here is Blake. So Blake, you'll get a prompt to unmute yourself.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate this meeting here and the fact that you've taken this a special meeting to talk just specifically about this, and especially appreciate everything that the Watershed District does and has done for the area lakes over the last number of years. So just a couple comments. The Warner Nature Center continues to be brought up in previous discussions and tonight. And so, you know, I think it's a little tough to use that as an example where something that was funded, I would assume, with grants and state money and the Warner family from way back, to then all of a sudden put that burden on local taxpayers. We have here in Forest Lake and the surrounding area, the school district, we've put a couple $100 million into our schools here recently with many classrooms. We put $20 million into a new city hall, which is not new anymore, but still looks brand new, with different opportunities for meetings and that. And I think you need to consider that as well. I mean, we've got a pretty good tax burden going here. The community's reinvested in itself. And so the idea of a watershed district who is led by unelected officials that are just appointed, looking at a $2 million piece of property is just, to be quite honest with you, just a bad look. And why there is this outrage. I don't think this community has seen this much outrage or surprised since the concept of getting rid of the police department here in Forest Lake. So it sounds as though, from what you've done, the due diligence, that you're leaning on not doing it, but I would highly suggest you continue with that. And going forward, I think that, you know, there is probably no doubt in a lot of people's mind that you probably do need new space once everyone gets back to working in the office. But you know, like a for-profit business, you know, it's best to just get that budget set, figure out who your partners are, and get your exact needs before you start looking at different properties and bringing them up to the public, because then you do get this kind of misconceptions about things and maybe not all the facts aren't being brought out. So I really think that if it is going to go forward with some kind of a space, which that clearly looks like that's what the board would like to do, get everything figured out like a for-profit business would, and in your total budget, your exact needs, and then start making decisions of what properties to look at. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Blake. I don't think there's any questions to answer there, so we'll move on to the chat, but there are concepts that I think we'll address when the board reconvenes. Okay, let's go to you, Emily.
Okay, the next 4 chats that came in from Kel. Why would it take acquiring this property have an impact on saving the peninsula? Why wouldn't, or why haven't the watershed district taken measures? From Joe, how does this benefit anyone who pays taxes on the lake? This does not benefit anyone who lives on the lake. From Dan, why would grants or donations go to purchasing property for the watershed instead of going to projects? My other question is, why would the watershed not try and get a feel for the town's opinion before spending money on investigations, appraisals, and hiring firms for input? And then from Vicky, in reference to an earlier question about budgeted dollars, the budgeted amount, and how much FL residents and taxpayers would be paying for. That's not what the question was. There has to be a budget for office space. What is it? Thank you for listening to our concerns. I think it's important to know that there is a petition with over 600 signatures against this, many of which stated they would rather see a revenue generating entity in this space, not an office.
Is that all of them?
There are 2 more that I could read off now.
Go ahead, read those.
From Mark, how many boat slips are at this site and how many are planned? And from Blake, maybe you should consider 23840 Goodview Circle if Highway 35 is so important, since you made it impossible for a business to build on. And that's all that we have right now.
Okay. Were there questions in there, Mike, that you captured?
Right. Well, the first one, Madam Chair, President, or managers and members of the public. So first one on the peninsula. So I guess, two things. I think we have, and I think this really goes to then some of the education pieces. So, without being, coy about it, but, a lot of the trees along Forest Lake have been removed. And this has been a very notable impact on the stability of the shoreline. So, and so I know that people have to have access to the lake, and I'm fortunate enough that my wife and I own a small property on a smaller lake about an hour away. So, but it's always been very important for me to have maintained a full vegetated natural shoreline with plenty of trees. So the city has an ordinance about tree removal. We do not regulate that. And but we do have a program to advance the opportunity for citizens. It's a plant grant program to help restore shorelines. There are some other opportunities. Burnett County has a program where they offer a property tax credit in exchange for a permanent easement to establish a buffer on the shorelines. And the board has not considered that, but I'm just giving an example of things that could be done to help restore it. Presently, of the roughly almost 1,000 properties on Forest Lake, 80% of them are largely or no longer have a really noticeable buffer that would meet standards. So, I mean, that's just kind of a reality of it. And actually that we've done the measurements. We spend a lot of time, again, doing cost benefit analysis based off of sequential diagnostic monitoring and some other work. That program that we're doing currently, just within the last couple of weeks, won a state award for its implementation and its low cost approach to effectively identify projects that have a higher return on investment. This has saved literally tens of millions of dollars within the district, trying to achieve the same water quality results. So the shoreline is really it's a major concern. So I'm glad we have this opportunity this evening to talk about it. So it is kind of the last remaining thing. We have a couple more grants and some more work that we're going to do in terms of sources from water that enters into the lake. We did a pretty detailed study on our street sweeping program. We worked with the University of Minnesota. I had some prior experience with this, and this helped the city obtain a grant to purchase that street sweeper. So a lot of the nutrients coming in off from the external part is being addressed. We're in the process of doing an analysis of the internal load. That means all the accumulated nutrients within the lake for potential treatment with alum to sort of lock it in. But then the last remaining thing to really for sustaining a long-term healthy forest lake is the shoreline, because it has the potential to deliver roughly 1,000 pounds of phosphorus a year if we considered it was at a pound per year based off of current activity. A natural shoreline would be about 1/10 of that or so. Obviously trees, leaves are going to fall in and stuff, and we're trying to develop a program to encourage residents not to blow grass clippings or leaves into the lake and artificially or limit their amount of fertilizer on their lawns and things like that. So all really important things that we're trying to work with the community on understanding the impacts that are that occurred to these lakes. And I know they're all inadvertent. I mean, that's no different than the ag community. We're trying to work with them too. Growing up on a dairy farm, a lot of things that were done in the past that people didn't intentionally do to harm their local water resources. And so we're not trying to suggest that at all. We're just trying to help understand ourselves how some of these things have occurred, and then how do we remedy those solutions that are cost effective for the current and future generations. So I think that's, kind of the one thing. So, we could work with them, but it would, we would look largely to the private landowner to still take some level of responsibility or partnership. We always are willing to provide technical assistance to any landowner. We always do that. So, and there are some other things that I'm looking to try to test to help preserve the shoreline, and I hope that we can look at that. I found it very interesting when we were in the old city hall. The historical society had their materials there, and I remember being very, very interested in history myself, perusing a bunch of their photos, and how many of them from 100 years ago or so, when it was largely a resort community, the photos of the lake that showed really a large amount of emergent vegetation, especially First Lake and such, which indicates then that was the natural state of the water and of the lake. So there's an opportunity for some restoration work in a number of areas. So the next question is, why would grants go to purchasing property for watersheds instead of going to projects? Really depends on the type of grant. So there are some grants available that are available for such facilities specifically, and of course, if a private donor wanted to have fund an environmental learning center, Jeffers has funded a couple of them. So, and I was part of one of those efforts. So, so it's certainly possible. But on a project basis, vast majority, all of our major projects have been funded through Clean Water Fund grants, because we've done the data collection and we've been able to make the case that these are really a high, again, return on investment from a public standpoint. I guess I'll leave that. The other question about why would the watershed not try to get a feel for the town opinion, other than the fact that I shared earlier that the board had several, public meetings in September, October, and November on this, and obviously we're getting it. We're getting it now. So, are there budget dollars for the acquisition? Okay, you were asking about for the office space, I think, and so the current space, it's a little over $3,000. We pay some level of the utilities for it directly, and of course, each year that amount goes up per the agreement that's in the lease. And I think the board is aware of the petition. Right now, currently with 600 people that are opposed to such an idea. So how many boat slips are there? There are 20, 16 of them currently for rent. That there would be no, there's been no discussion about expanding that or anything other than using the revenue to offset the lost property taxes. So, so the last one, maybe we should consider this property in Good Use Circle. And I'm not sure what we made it possible to build on. So, but yeah, I mean, we're evaluating, some other properties as well. At least I would anticipate that we we will going forward as well, in addition to what we have presently. Are there any more questions? That's all for right now.
All right, thank you. Anything more from your chat area, Emily?
We've gotten 3 more individuals with chats.
Okay.
I'm gonna share those now. From Mark. In reference to an earlier question, Cargill Corporation is the only comparable property with lake access across the dam from Lake Minnetonka. From John, the case has not been made to defend this proposal. The community at large strongly opposes use of this property for this purpose. Please vote against. And then finally, the most recent chat from Kel. So if it's trees to prevent peninsula from eroding, then why hasn't district educated sent notices of residents to plant trees? Mike Kinney, you didn't answer why it would take acquiring this location to prevent erosion.
Okay, Madam President, managers. Yeah, we haven't made an attempt to assess the number of properties of entities. I guess the only local one I know of is Chisago County is on the peninsula, on a lake up in just to the north of us. But in terms of other office spaces, I'm not familiar with. And again, we weren't trying to make that assessment. A case has not been made to defend this proposal. Again, I think we were just going through a process, and when the property was suggested to the district and trying to go through the process, it was an opportunity to evaluate the process, if you will, through the lens of this particular property. Please vote against it. So I think that's the board's decision. So to the question about the trees, what I was suggesting early on is that it is a private property, or it has been. So we do send out materials. We've developed some things that packets of materials that we've tried to give to new residents. We had one of our CAC members that spent several years trying to help facilitate that. Been on our website, we talk about a different board meetings and educational opportunities. So the plant grant program has been available, and I think it really then speaks to some of the need that we have in terms of doing education. We would like to be able to do more of this. And again, kind of back to I'm not saying that people at all are doing things intentionally, but it is important to understand some of the impacts that we make by certain decisions. So, how do we help facilitate an understanding with some level of restoration while still being able to enjoy these important water resources? So I hope that answers your question at this time. Cal, if not, feel free to respond again or just let me know.
Okay, I will ask. Okay, here's one that just popped up. Go ahead, Emily.
So yeah, 2 more have come in since the last reading from Chris. Please provide a list of the properties the CLFLWD is considering and entering into a lease or purchase agreement. Chris, homeowner on Forest Lake. And then Vicky, it's actively eroding. You would think the CLFLWD would do more than send a packet.
Okay, I think, those are comments rather than questions for you, Mike. And I think that's something that the board can take up. This will all be aggregated so that the board members have these comments and we can take them into consideration as we discuss activities in the future. Did one more just come in? I'm sorry. Did one more chat just come in, Emily?
The latest I'm seeing is from Vicky to all hosts and panelists. If someone sent you a direct one, I wouldn't be able to see it.
No, it's not direct.
Okay.
It's from Vicky M.
Yep, I've read that one.
Okay.
Maybe I have a lag behind you from Sherry.
Okay,
Unreal, this is BS.
okay. All right.
We're responding in real time. I have one more.
Mhm.
Where is the strategic plan for future space? If none agree with this is a waste of time and money to pursue if you don't have a strategic plan.
Well, I think that's what we were talking about earlier, and maybe Rebecca came in later, but we did get a little bit off of the topic of the specific discussion of Willow Point into some of the background and the plan for land for the building is something that we're going to be, it's actually our policy and process. And then with that will come opportunities that we're aware of at the time, our staff is aware of. But we're looking for that sometime in late January, early February to be brought to the board. It's not specific to Willow Point. Tonight is to be specific about Willow Point, but that's the more general plan for looking at properties. So there's 4 more chats that came in, so I will have you read those, Emily.
Okay, so we read the one about the strategic plan for future space. Dan says, let's go, Brandon. Terry says, please understand that many residents have no idea that you exist, especially if we don't live in the lake. So that you would explain the concern for a group of unelected people spending more of our tax money with no direct impact on our lives. And then I see from Chris, please verify the existing lease agreement terms on the property the CLFLWD is currently in contract with.
What was he asking for? Please verify the existing lease agreement terms. Maybe we can share that with him. I'm not sure that we want to spend more time looking at that specific thing right now. I don't think you have that with you even, Mike, but it's a basic lease agreement, so there's nothing special about it. Do you want to comment on that, Mike, any further?
No, Manager Anderson.
Okay.
I think we've covered it already. Thank you.
All right.
And yes, we can make it available.
Do you see something, Jessica? I'm getting a message from you that says
current one is, so they were wondering about the terms and date of expiration. So the current lease ends the end of 2022. We need to notify the landlord, the owner, July 1st of this year for a 1-year extension.
All right.
And we're currently paying a little over $3,000 is the next check due. So.
Okay. All right. There are 2 hands up, Jessica. I'll let you.
Yep, we have 2 hands up. One of the individuals, I believe, has already spoken. So we'll go with the individual who has not spoken and then circle back around. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that sounds appropriate.
All right. So the first individual here we have is shows up as an email address, C. Tilton. So you will receive a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, C. Tilton is my wife. This is Brian Tilton. Current resident on Lake One, moved in here in 15, lived just south of the lake since 94 we moved in, and we've used the lake every single year since. I go all the way back to the days of Willow Point and a very avid ice fisherman, and the days when we could go and grab a burger and fries and all that kind of stuff at a local restaurant, which we currently don't have available to us by boat and or by vehicle if we're out there fishing. I guess I would prefer to see the opportunity stay available for a restaurant of some sort to come in there. Also, living on North Shore Trail, we see a lot of motorcycles and antique cars and all that kind of stuff that go around, and having a good place for them to stop and take in the views of the lake where we don't really have that except the park, and be able to grab a burger and a refreshment if needed would be another advocate thing there. Mike brought up good points as a Six Sigma lean principles. I hope that we're utilizing all of those when we're making business decisions. And I hope that you guys look at a 5 and a 10-year plan when we're doing stuff like this, as this isn't just taxpayers' money for us that live on the water, which I'm currently looking at my bill for next year, and it's gone up tremendously more, even though the value of my house has gone up, and I understand that, but it doesn't do anything until I sell it. I'm still paying a lot of money to live on this water. And you guys are a big benefit to us for taking care of it, and I say thank you for that. But my vote would be to please leave that as a restaurant opportunity so that we have a place to go visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And one more.
The other individual has lowered their hand.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, Jessica. Emily, any more in the chat?
I don't have anything else in the chat.
Okay. Well, I'm going to recommend.
I'm
that
sorry
we-
to interrupt. One just came in.
Okay, go ahead.
From Dave. This may have been covered, and then another one. So Dave, this may have been covered, but for those of us who aren't familiar, is there an actual plan for the watershed district to be able to use the space to generate revenue and offset any tax loss? Or is the issue at hand to just occupy the space? And Joe, how much would the renovations cost for the Willow Point property?
Okay.
Madam Chair, managers, to the first question, so that would still be, again, through our process, still evaluating it. And yes, I think there's been some discussion that we should have completed the process of evaluating the district needs with our community partners before engaging into this evaluation of this property. So I don't think there's any question on that. The board has not talked about utilizing it for that, but I know that in one prior situation I'm familiar with, community has made it, if there was a partnership, for example, with the city, if they wanted to utilize it and manage the open space for public gatherings to offset it, that could be a possibility. That I have thought about, but again, it's not really, I guess it wasn't at that point of the discussion with the board to bring that up, because we didn't even know if it was a suitable thing to even move into the next phase of our discussion with them on. So how much does the renovation cost? Let's see, I'm trying to think offhand of what that was. Just in total, what's the square footage? Price, build new versus renovate.
I can jump in with that price.
Yeah.
It was roughly about $500,000, about 500,000.
Right, but the life cycle cost over a 25-year period, I think the differential was about 8 or 9%.
Yeah, that was to convert it between or from a restaurant to an office, basically. So, All right. So, are there any other comments? We want to make sure that the public has every opportunity to say what's on their mind before we move back into our board meeting.
We do have another individual who has indicated they would like to speak.
Okay.
That individual is Kel, and Kel, you will receive a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hello, Kel Malberg, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. I just wanted to say one comment to kind of finish off and end the night. Obviously, we all know that a revenue generating company would drastically benefit the community and its local residents by maintaining a restaurant in that location. I can personally tell you that my wife and I purchased a house on Second Lake 4 years ago. And we were regulars attending that restaurant. Not only that, but when we made the offer out to acquire this house, that is exactly the restaurant where we sat until that purchase was done. So that's just a little bit of a personal note. I'm also pretty sure that everyone is aware of the recent Forest Lake decisions and the negativity that it's generated in the media and the public eye. I'm really hopeful that the board will consider other alternatives and not this location. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kel. Any others that wish to speak?
I have 4 more chats, comments in the chat that I can share.
Okay.
For the record. From the Galaxy phone, this has been productive. Thank you. Hopefully everyone will get more involved with city council meetings after this. Raise awareness for the watershed district and all they do. Let's keep Forest Lake healthy for years to come. Ken says, just curious, but the place that is for sale that is off 61 near 8 and 35, that was a car lot and is for sale for much less than Willow Point, could be a great spot to renovate and relocate your team potentially. Tev says, I've lived on the lake since 1988. Please reconsider the Willow Point property and purchase elsewhere. The community wants it as a restaurant again. We don't have one available on the lake. Vanelli's is closed. Please reconsider. And then finally, Chris, has the CLFLWD verified the return on investment for the organization if moving forward with the purchase of the Willow Point property?
Madam Chair, managers. So from, well, I guess the first one was more just a comment. So thank you for that. The next one from Ken was on the place near 61 and 8. That was former car lot. Yes, the realtor, we've just recently been aware of that property. And I guess it would be something under consideration going forward. So, but it, to my knowledge, came for sale after we'd already went the evaluation of this one here. So, I mean, and there's been some other ones. You've been on the other side of 61 and 8 on the corner, coming from the north. There's kind of a vacant lot there that would have some potential. The asking price for that is still pretty high, all considering when you think about the new build. The next one that is lived on the lake since 1988, and like us to consider out to evaluate something elsewhere. So, and then from Chris, has the CLFLW verified the return on investment for the organization if moving forward with the purchase of the Willow property? So I mean, I suppose it's not in specific dollars in totality, but that's an interesting question because we certainly have done that for the majority of our projects of any certainly size.
Can I jump in here though, Mike? And a traditional ROI is not appropriate for a government because we're providing services. And so it's the value of the services that have to be calculated for the public. But I think the board has heard enough comments from the public to understand where their position is. I think for those of people who joined the meeting early on, the board did give their general feeling for this project based on the appraisal that came through. So I don't think we have to get into details on that, but it's a good question that is raised, and there would be an analysis, not in the traditional commercial sense for profit, but it would be for the value to the public of those services. And you also have to take into account, like we've been listening here tonight, the negative impact for a high value property on a lakeshore like this. So whatever the location has to be, we have to take that into account too when we're making that assessment. But I hope that answers Chris's question or comment there on the ROI. There will be one, probably not the same one that you're looking for in a business setting though. Are there any other comments that need to be made or would like to be made?
We received 2 more in the chat. I joined late. Will a recording of this meeting be posted? And then Willow Point is a historic location for many families and generations. Please allow other buyers to attempt this as a restaurant. Please add my comment. It's the gateway to Lake 2. It's the sweetheart connection between Lake 1 and 3 to meet up.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, managers, so the meeting is being recorded, and I believe, Jessica, we would have the ability to post it, right? So right through YouTube. So I do want to go back to the ROI piece a little bit. We know that there's been some studies done on the impact of property values related to water quality. So maintaining a healthy lake also impacts the property values either positively or negatively. And so that calculation, so again, through the services, could be attempted. So, and the board knows that we have our progress report that the district provides and is on our website under the title reports. And that is a unique document that this watershed district does that no other one currently does, because we do try to follow a lot of metrics and evaluate all of our activities and our costs to see, we have a philosophy of constant process improvement to see how we can provide better service to the public. So, and then, yes, on the Willow Point, I think that's been, point has been made that it's been, a really important property on Forest Lake.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any further chats or hands raised? All right.
A couple more chats have come in.
Okay.
One more message from Donna. We bought 3 homes out there just to have a lakeside dining. It's a gem. And then Greg Bruss here, my family and I live on First Lake and really would like to see this property become a restaurant again. Sorry, joining late.
Okay, very good. All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Manager Baki here. I'd like to comment on the value of having a restaurant on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Before moving to Bone Lake 10 years ago, I lived on Prior Lake for 30 years. When my wife and I first moved there, there was a restaurant on the lake called Freddy's. And Freddy's only lasted a few years before it went out of business and it became McWilly's. That lasted a couple of years and then they went out of business and it became Captain Jack's, which I think it still is today. But I do understand the value of having a restaurant on the lake where people want to have a beer and a burger. And I am hopeful that they can resurrect that site for a restaurant again. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to give people some hope out there that they do value the restaurant. And as a board, I think we understand that. Yes. And are sensitive to that as well. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Any other last minute comments coming in?
Nothing in the chat as of now.
Nothing. Thank you.
No speakers
Jessica?
either.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to close the public hearing and public comment section. It's not a hearing, a public comment section. Thank you to everyone who commented. I know it's not easy to do that sometimes in a public meeting, but we appreciate your bravery and for providing that insight to the board. And if we will change the slide to the board considerations for course of action. I'm seeing one chat come in. Can we add that please to the record just as a written chat? And I'm going to reconvene the board. And so this will be for the board members only. And I open it up to a conversation about and discussion on what steps we would like to take next. Typically, we have a discussion point or points first, and then we work our way to a motion. But I think it might be more appropriate to use the standard Robert's Rules of Order method, which is to state a motion first, get a second, and then have discussion. And I would like to make a motion to end our investigation and our consideration of the Willow Point property.
Madam
I'll
Chair,
second
I'd
that.
like to second that.
All right, seconded by Manager Baki. And now I will open it up to discussion for the board. Okay, I just again want to thank every member of the public that came tonight. I want to really commend you for making the comments. I think it's important for you to understand, I hope that came out, that we're doing an investigation. I think hoping that, not hoping, but thinking that the property may have had an impact from the recession in that sector, and then also because of the pandemic, of course, effects. That's not the case. And so the appraisal is very clear on that, and there's no purpose in us moving forward. So we understand the value of Forest Lake. We understand the value of that restaurant. As mentioned earlier, many of us frequented that as well. And we miss it as well. Not as intimately, I'm sure, as those of you living on the lake, but nonetheless, it was a valuable asset to the community. Any other comments from the board before we move to a vote? All right, we have to do a roll call vote. I'm sorry, was that somebody logging on?
No, I just wanted to make a comment, Manager
Sure.
Anderson. I want to thank
Okay.
everybody for taking the time. It's the second week before Christmas, and we're all very busy, and I was very impressed with all the people that turned out to voice their opinions. And I think we have learned a lot about how people perceive different things that we're considering, and this will be a big help to us, especially after we collate all the answers and take another look at them. So I want to thank everybody again for their input, and I wish everybody a good holiday.
Okay, any other comments? All right, roll call vote, please, Bobby.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
I didn't hear Manager
yeah,
Taves.
can we get that again? Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
It is a unanimous vote to not move forward with the Willow Point property. Our discussion is over. Our action is over. This is a special meeting, so there are no further considerations. And I appreciate everybody coming. Also want to copy Manager Schmalz's wish for you all to have a happy holiday season. And let's all hope that a restaurant does resurrect itself in that location, and we'll all meet you there. Thank you very much. All right, we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn. Manager Schmaltz.
Thank you.
I'll second Manager Loth.
Thank you, Manager Loth. Well, roll call vote, please.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Loth,
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
See you Thursday.
See you Thursday.